today I'm delighted to say that I'm in conversation with Neil Dickinson, author of Scotch the Scare-go series of children's books. Now, as adults, we often forget how easily our children can become scared and a bit anxious. What we think is probably straightforward and everyday circumstances in life can sometimes really present a challenge to children. So lots of things, of course, can scare them, very personal too as well. It could be their first sports day at school, or visiting the dentist, or something as simple as maybe riding their bike, perhaps for the first time. So for the sake of their development, it's important that children overcome their fears and we allow them to talk and tell us about some of the things that worry us, and that builds up their confidence. And that's where Scotch and his sidekick rabbit Hop come into play here with these lovely books. So Neil is here to, he's created a wonderful series of books to help children overcome their fears. He's here with me today. And Scotch is a very friendly scarecrow who magically appears when a child is scared and shows them how to overcome their fears. That's what I really liked about it in particular. It caught my eye. You weren't trying to rescue a child. It was important for the child to become their own superhero and overcome it too a little bit. So without further ado, here is Neil to tell us all about his books. Thank you for joining me today.
Hello, Sue. Thank you for having me and inviting me along. It's exciting for me.
So listen, tell us, how did this all begin? What's your journey? And tell us all about how you ended up writing these lovely books.
Well, it's quite a long story, but I will keep it brief, as brief as I can. My career really has been all about medical writing. So I've worked in I'm a scientist by training, and I worked in a very technical sphere, sort of turning pretty dry clinical papers into more easily digestible reading matter for doctors and nurses and the medical profession in general. So it's pretty dry stuff, interesting, but dry.
Yeah.
And then one day, this is going back about 6 or 7 years now, one day, possibly more, one of our clients developed a drug for an ultra rare children's condition. And these things can be quite humbling and traumatic when you see what some parents have to go through. And in this particular case, parents of these children who are born with this incredibly rare condition, they have to inject their little toddlers every night. And it's clearly, we've all, every one of us who've had children can understand how traumatic that must be.
Yes. Yeah.
So I came up with the idea. I said to the client, well, why don't we try and write a bedtime story to, as much as possible, try to normalize the injection? Yeah. And they said, yeah, go for it. So have a go. And so I did, and I came up with this character called Hoppy the Frog, and I wrote this and sent it off to the client, and with my heart in my mouth, and I was amazed to see it came back with not one full stop even changed.
Wonderful.
So they said, we love it, go for it. So it made me think that perhaps I had a voice, a writing voice that I wasn't aware of.
Yes.
So then, in a wider sense, that got me thinking about, well, perhaps I should develop my own character. And I can honestly not remember where I came up with Scotch the Scare-go, which it was originally.
I know.
And then suddenly I had the idea of, hold on, Scare-go. Well, that'd be nice. And because at the time I had 2 young children myself, and as you said at the beginning, we do forget how scared children can be at fairly innocuous things. And I remember asking my 2 children sort of the types of things that scared them. And it's extraordinary. It was things like crows, dustbins. It's just weird because as adults we forget what it's like to live in a child's mind.
And sometimes we poo-hoo it when they have nightmares or they have little fears, and you never know until you ask them. And if you accept them and don't try and poo-hoo them, then they can kind of move through them. So how did you come up with the names? And well, you said about Scotch and Hop. I mean, then the story started. How did you go about getting the theme through, and that wonderful bit at the end, which I absolutely love, the little surprise, which we're going to spoil, but who cares? Tell us about that.
I wrote the first story pretty quickly, and
Yeah.
it was probably, to my horror, before this interview, I looked online on my file on my computer and realized the first Word document of it was written in 2016. So I sat on it for a long time,
Yes.
and there were two things that kick-started it. One, I joined the Slough Writers Group, which I'm still a member of, fabulously supportive group. And one evening, I decided to read my story out to them, and they said, "It's fabulous, go for it." And that gave me real confidence.
Yeah.
And then simultaneously and by accident, I became reacquainted with an old colleague of mine from my very early advertising years, and a chap called Dave Clark, who's an illustrator.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's the illustrator here, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Yeah. And I'd been struggling with the idea of how to illustrate these books, because a lot of modern children's picture books, personally, to me, I find the illustrations a little bit too scratchy and edgy sometimes.
Yes, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And that's not denigrating them. It's just my
No,
particular.
I know what you mean. Yeah, and these are beautiful, aren't they? They're not sort of scary. I mean, I was sent a book once, and the fairies were just so scary. I thought, goodness me, that's sort of strange illustration. Whereas your illustrations really complement the story, don't they?
Well, I was aware of Dave's style. From working with him before, and I deliberately, when I briefed him, I said, "Look, I really want you to do your bit, which is do your thing, which is I want homely, cozy, illustrative style,
friendly and warm."
Exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
So he's done a fantastic job for me.
Yes.
And so it all started to come together, and then I had the idea of Scotch, and thinking, well, hold on, if he wears a tartan, kilt, then at the end of the story, I could have him give. There we are. Yes, I could have him give a piece of his kilt to the child who he's been giving comfort to, and that would be a little keepsake. And
I know. Look, I was so taken with that as a comforter. It's just such a lovely, lovely idea. Who are the books? What sort of age? Who are they aimed at?
I always say the sweet spot is about 3 to 7.
Yeah.
I've had feedback from parents of children younger than that, and children older than that, who have got a lot of pleasure from it.
Yeah, it's a guidance, isn't it, really? They can be read to or with the children, or they can read them on their own. But I think they also start some good conversations. I used to call them big conversations with little people, because by reading the story, it's not so intense, and you can find out from your children, if you ask them an open-ended question, not a closed one like yes or no, perhaps what is sort of scary to them, and then you can reassure them. But the other thing that I loved is that you don't rescue. The whole point of the story is that the child kind of overcomes it with support, of course. That was really unique for me. Tell me how you came upon that. Was that with your own kids or something?
I have a fairly strong dislike for modern cinema and the superhero genre in particular.
Yeah.
And why I dislike it is that don't get me wrong, it's fantastic for my teenagers now. They love it. It's great entertainment for them. But this concept that runs throughout all of them, that it's essentially just magic hocus pocus, isn't it?
Escapism, really, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So don't worry if you're in a spot of bother. Superman will come along and get you out of it. And I just think it's a little bit one-dimensional.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be more subtle about it.
Yeah.
And I thought that what would be nice would be if Scotch just really gives quite gentle, supportive advice. It's almost like having a little friendly ear, to say.
Yes.
So that a child is saying, well, what can I do here? And the Scotch appears. It's, well, you could try this, and So that's the sort of tone I wanted to
I love it. That's what I really like. So that, the child feels it's okay to have a fear, but it's okay that maybe, you can overcome it yourself in a sense. Which was the first one? Scotch the Scare-go or Hop Scotch?
Scotch the Scare-go was the first one.
Yes, but tell us about what the story's about for mums and dads listening to this.
Well, it's really the introductory story, because it's the one where I introduce the character and how he becomes a scare-go.
Yes.
And his very first adventure as a scare-go, when he helps a little girl who's locked outside a kitchen door at night time, looking after a pet rabbit, because she thinks the rabbit is being scared by a fox. So so it's a very, very, very simple, gentle story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I had a lot of feedback from that story to say, oh, we love the character of Hop the rabbit.
Yes.
So I put more of him in the second story.
Yeah.
And the second story deals with two issues. One, well, it sort of touches on issues like children at the dentist and having their first swimming lessons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Only in a tangential way.
Yeah.
But the main focus of the story is on a little boy who's scared to start school. Because
Yes.
he just sees the big playground and all the other loud, boisterous children, and thinks, wow, how am I going to fit in? And in fact, that's a memory of mine from 4 years old, my first day at school. I remember thinking exactly that.
I remember, you've triggered me to remember. I remember hiding behind my mum as Mrs. Mason was there and all the children were going to run in. And I remember being kind of like this a bit, thinking, oh, I'm a bit reluctant. So it's funny, it really lives with you. And, you know, it was okay. I wasn't traumatized or anything, but I do remember it as a bit scary. So that's why the children can relate to your stories, really. I mean, where can people buy them? Where are they?
Well, they're on my website, which is www.scotchbooks.com.
Yeah.
And if you go on there, it's very simple to navigate the site and choose which book you want. The vast majority of people are buying what we call the bundle, both books together.
Yes.
And sales are going extremely well. I'm absolutely delighted.
Lovely. And then are they on Amazon? I mean, they're certainly in the Sue Atkins Book Club, where you can go to my book club and find them there. And then that will send you to all the links of where you can get it. Where are you on social media, Neil? Tell us so we can follow you if we're watching this.
Facebook is my principal means of dissemination of news and information about Scotch.
Yeah.
And Instagram too. And through Facebook presence, we drive customers to the website.
So they can find it very easily if they put your name in. If they click on the links to this, they can go and get both books. Are there any more? Tell us about that. Are there any more planned?
The third book is about to go to print.
Lovely.
And this one contains the other little strand of an idea that I've had at the outset, which plays on the name Scotch. So I had the idea at the beginning that as parents, and I've had 4 children, I remember what it's like.
Yes.
As much as we love the thought of how cozy and cuddly it is at night time reading a bedtime story, there are nights when you come home from work and you think, oh, do I really have to read Thomas the Tank Engine again?
I know. I've been there.
Because they're quite tedious books, I find. So I had a little idea of just a very gentle, subtle, knowing wink to the parents. And so my third book is called Scotch on the Rocks.
Oh, lovely.
So it's a story about him helping children who are stuck on the beach at high tide and stuff. So, but I just thought it's a nice nod to parents to think they could say to their children, oh, how about we have Scotch on the Rocks tonight? And of course the child will be oblivious to the humor.
I know, but it's lovely. It's gentle, it's warm, it's heartwarming. They're absolutely lovely. And I'm delighted that they're in the Sue Atkins Book Club. And it's really nice to talk to you today. So if people are interested, they can go to your Facebook, Neil Dickinson with an I, and we'll put all the links on the video and stuff like that. And it's been a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's been a real pleasure to meet you, Sue, and thank you so much for inviting me.